thank you for inviting me to come this evening and talk about my favorite things. Some of my favorite things, we'll leave some out, but mostly flowers and foliages, gardens and travel, and then art and bloom, because this year, if my club will send me, and I think they're going to, it'll be my 21st time at Art and Bloom at the MFA. I just love doing it. And I think in your publicity you had chosen a painting that I interpret actually at Floral in Winter in Worcester. Have you gone to that? That's in the middle of January or the end of January. They seem to be able to brave the snowstorms. And I just wanted to tell you a little bit about my philosophy of Art and Bloom, and that is I don't like to reproduce, I like to be inspired by the painting. So this one day, the day that I had done that one in Worcester, I was following the guide around to listen to what she said about me, and she was interacting with the crowd, and they said, "What do you see about this painting?" And of course I'm standing there like this, you know. "How did she do?" And whatever, and they said, "Well, she doesn't have any orange in the sky." And I'm like, I didn't want to put orange in the sky. I wanted to be inspired by the trees and the foliages, and I did texture and all of that. I didn't really think I needed orange in the sky. So that's my philosophy, and what I'm going to show you today is that I go to gardens now and I kind of choose something that I'm going to be inspired by to do a flower arrangement. I call them my floral postcards, because I love sending postcards when I travel. In fact, my grandson expects me to send him postcards. He says, "How many days are you gone, Grandma?" I'm like, 9. I'll get 9 postcards. I don't think so. But anyway, I do send a lot of postcards. And so these are going to be my floral postcards that I might send you from the gardens that I visit. And the first one is in Nebraska. How many of you have been to Nebraska? Oh, okay, 2. Well, I forgot to tell you one thing. In 2006, we went to Alaska. And on the way back, I was so excited. I said, I think we visited almost all the 50 states, you know, so we started adding them up. And we had like 17 more to go. Like, whoa. But and we had some rules. We had to stay, my husband's with me tonight. He likes to drive at night. I don't really. So we had to both be together. We couldn't have gone to the different states and stayed by ourselves, or we can't just drive through. You have to stay at least 2 nights, and most of the time we stay longer than that. And then the other unwritten rule is probably he's a model railroader, and so if there are any trains in the vicinity, we have to visit those. And then, of course, I get to go to the gardens then. And we travel, with some of them you'll hear me say we're driving our own car. If I don't have to pack too much stuff, I'll take the book. So I have 1,000 Places to See Before You Die. I don't know if any of you have ever seen that book, but I love it. And then the other is the AAA book. So if it's a gem in there and in the 1,000 places, it's probably pretty good. So on our way, oh, by the way, we did visit all 50 states between then. And last year was the last one. Anybody want to guess what it was?
Boston. Hawaii. Hawaii. Florida.
Alaska.
Wyoming. Nebraska.
North Dakota. And I think there are a lot of people that save that till the end. We didn't really on purpose, but it just was in the middle of nowhere. Anyway, but anyway, this is Nebraska, and we first visited on our way to Omaha. We went to Lincoln, which is the capital of Nebraska, and the first stop was at the Capitol building, which is an Art Nouveau huge, well, what they call it is the Tower on the Plains. And we went into the Capitol building, took our tour there, which had beautiful artwork and wood carving and all of that, and then to the gift shop because I had to buy the postcards. So as I'm standing in the gift shop, the ladies looked like, you know, they might have some good advice. So I said, she realized I was from Boston, and then I was telling her, she said, well, what brings you here? And I told her we were visiting all 50 states, da-da-da-da. And I said, did she have any recommendations? And she said, well, down around the corner, a few blocks, there's a little garden called Sunken Gardens. And lo and behold, it had stopped raining when we went out, so we hunted the Sunken Gardens, and we hadn't read about that one. And we pulled up and parked along the street, and on the container it said, taken care of by the Lincoln Garden Club. And I said, I think we're at the right place, you know, everybody, garden club involved. And we started walking in and read the history. It was started in 1930 during the Depression in the elbow of Antelope Creek and the dump site, so that men had work to do. And then you started to descend an unbelievable wall of color and texture. You're sinking now into the garden, and so you're looking up at all these terraces of color that are planted along the walls, waterfalls, so forth. And now it's taken over by the University of Nebraska, so you know good things are happening there, test gardens. And so I've kind of made a garden, started a garden here. And we're calling this design a combination of plants and flowers. It's not a Poe Fleur because it doesn't follow the rules in the handbook, but these are actual plants, the croton plant. And if you can imagine this, all of these wouldn't probably fit in here unless I did something to them. So I took them out of the pot, and I put them in a plastic bag, and I squished them around a little bit, and I built my own wall, my own tiered wall, so they were different levels. And so there's a croton plant in a plastic bag. This is a calancho. Isn't that a pretty calancho? Kalanchoe, some people say. And this is a peperomia named Pink Lady. And so I thought they all blended together. And I have oasis here and there, so I have my walls built. And now I'm going to add some flowers because there were, if I can find my scissors, here they are. And we're going to start with these fabulous roses. They're called cherry brandy roses, and I think they have every color in them that you can imagine. Pink, red, orange, yellow, gold. And I think they're going to look just dandy with the calancho plants. And I'm going to find my oasis in here, and I'm going to tuck it in. And I also have a pepper plant in here. It's called Masquerade. And I think they call it Masquerade because as it gets riper and riper, it changes colors. So I have orange and purple ones in here. And those are in plastic bags as well. So if you have to make an arrangement with plants and flowers, so maybe you have some house plants around. My house plants get very nervous when I come by with scissors. But I'm adding some color with the roses. And then I'm going to add a little yellow because there's some yellow in the croton leaves. Pick that up because I can't tell you how much color we saw in that garden. And not only that, but the brides love it there. They go and have their pictures taken. And we liked it so much that when we went through Omaha the second time around, we went back to the Sunken Garden. And it was in the summertime. And there was a bride there, and she was actually wearing a color similar to this. And the dresses were really pretty. The groomsmen were real handsome and everything. It was 96 or 98 in the shade. And after a while, I chatted with one, said, could I take your picture? And I said, how was the wedding? He said, oh, the wedding hasn't gone on yet. It's not till 6 o'clock. This was like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and they were like sweating bullets, And before we left the garden, and we were there for maybe an hour and a half or so, another bride showed up, had her picture taken. This one was dressed in, or her party was dressed in blue. And when we left, that first bride was still there having pictures taken. I heard the photographer tell her she was a really good subject. And so it is taken over by the city and has been revamped, or renovated, I suppose you would say, since the year 2000. So it is really, really gorgeous. Lily pods, fountains, statues, all that kind of thing that keeps your interest. A row of begonias and coleus like you wouldn't believe. And there is another garden in Omaha that some of you might want to visit if you go there. It's called Laritzen, and it's quite fun. And guess what? It has a model railroad running through it. And not only that, but it's one of those railroads where all the buildings are built out of natural materials. And it's just unbelievable. And my favorite was the little water tower, you know, with the little hose that goes down. Harry Lauder's walking stick. It was so cool. So I wanted to go back there, because when I saw it the first time, I wasn't really thinking that I was going to put it in one of these programs. So I wanted to check it out again, but they were actually renovating there, and so a lot of it was closed. So I guess I'll have to go back to Omaha someday. And they really do have good steaks there, too. So I think this would be my postcard that I would send you from the Sunken Garden. So we're going to get on the plane now. And actually, we could drive to this one from there and go to Grand Rapids, Michigan. This was a good thing. We were driving on this trip. And we arrived in Grand Rapids on our way to Taliesin in Wisconsin. And we were going to take the ferry over so that we didn't have to drive. I've got to get my trash can right over here. And we arrived in the middle of the afternoon. So in the 1,000 Places and in the AAA, they've suggested that you check out the Frederick Meyer Garden and Sculpture Park. And it looked a little dark out again, but you know, gardens are beautiful in the rain, I have to say. So we decided to check it out and see if it was worth going to see. And you could take a tram ride. Well, tram rides are good there because it's a very big garden. And the most wonderful thing about that garden is that all of the sculptures have a setting of their very own. It's not like a big football field where they have them all lined up, but you have to go around these paths, and each one is displayed in a wonderful way. So Frederick Meyer's father, in 1934, opened a grocery store, a little one. And before long, well, it took a while, but he was the precursor to Walmart. And Meyer Incorporated is bigger than Walmart. It even has automotive and all that stuff. We didn't get to go shopping there, but maybe next time. So he earned a bit of change, and he was a collector. He collected large sculptures. His wife liked to garden. So guess what? They bought 80 acres of land, and they started to develop a garden because Frederick Jr. wanted a place to display his sculptures. So one of the sections of the garden is actually called Michigan Farmland, and all of the sculptures in that area, or all of the animals in the area, are sculptures. The horses, the cows, the sheep, the little kids, everything is a sculpture. And it's just very fascinating. There's a boardwalk where you walk along the marsh and see that display. There's children's garden that's very cool. There's the amphitheater where you can go to a show. There's a conservatory where his wife has all her special tropical flowers and everything. And in that building, there is a cafe, and would you believe the ceiling has chihuly glass flowers on it. And when you walk out of the cafe, there is a chihuly chandelier. And in that building as well, there is a gallery where they exhibit, they have different exhibits. But this particular time when we were there, it was modern art, and it was very modern. So there's something for everybody there. But my very favorite, as even on the tram ride, and by the way, we went back the next day because we couldn't do all this at the end of the day. And we got in reciprocally with our membership to Tower Hill, which if you belong to any of those big gardens, you should really check about the reciprocity, because you can get into a lot of gardens that way. So we could go more than once. My very favorite as we were driving around was called A Disc in Form of a Desert Rose. And I don't know if you know what a desert rose is, but it's a crystal formation that happens in the sand, with sand crystals and gypsum or barite in, arid areas. And I had bought this earlier when we went to Oklahoma. This is a barite one, and they must have a lot of them in Oklahoma. This one possibly came from like Tunisia or someplace different. But there was a sculpture by Arnaldo Pomodoro, and it was called The Disc in the Form of a Desert Rose. And so I said right away, I would like to try to make that in flowers. So that's what I'm doing. Now, another thing interesting about Frederick is that while he wanted a really neat centerpiece for his garden. Not your normal everyday kind of centerpiece, but a large sculpture. And so we heard about someone trying to recreate, to resculpt, remodel, the horse that Leonardo da Vinci had designed for Milan. And Leonardo did that in 1499. He had it in the center, and it was destroyed by people for target practice by the soldiers. And so it never got to be bronzed or finished. And so this airline pilot in Pennsylvania had this grand idea that he wanted to finish this for its 500th anniversary, which would have been 1999. And so Frederick heard about that, and he decided that that sounded like fun. So they had to scrap the whole thing that had been started by the airline pilot, because it's not really easy to sculpt a 24-foot high horse. This is a picture. So he hired his own sculptress. She was a woman, and she redesigned it and came up with something very similar to Leonardo's design. And lo and behold, in July of 1999, they unveiled it in the center of the Mayern Garden. And not only that, he made one for Milan too. And while he was overseeing this happening in the foundry, he collected a lot more huge sculptures. And this is actually the picture of the desert rose. And this is my postcard. You can all come up and look at these after too. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to ask you about the oasis.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Good. Please ask me questions, because I get talking, and I forget. It's the orange oasis. And I didn't want to cover it all up, so that's why I used the orange, because it's bronzed or whatever, and I was using the copper tone. And I'm going to even make it a little bit higher. And also, what I noticed in the, the rose in the disc, you have to give me, my stuff's all over the place, I don't know where it is. This is flax, New Zealand flax, and I bent it into it was straight like this, a bigger piece. I bent it into a circle, and I attached it at the top with U-glue dashes. Are you familiar with those? They changed my life, because before that, you had to staple or do something. But it looks like a package like this, and Joann Fabrics has a whole wall of U-glue in different shapes. Staples do work. They tear sometimes. But I used to spray them green because I didn't want you to see them, but now Staples got the idea, and they make green staples. Of course, you have to buy red ones and blue ones too, but it's okay. And then this is New Zealand flax, and if you can see it from back there, it's kind of striped. I couldn't get all the red striped. It's called variegated. It kind of has the red stripe like this. This is a Dracaena. And this is paper ribbon, which is supposed to look like aspidistra. Usually it comes in shades of green, the popular thing where you put the leaf in the vase so you don't see the stems, or you hide the oasis with the leaf, or you hide it with this aspidistra paper because you can get this wet. But I thought I've never seen an aspidistra leaf look like this, but it looks pretty much like the Dracaena or the variegated flax. So I use that together. And then in order to make the crystals, I have sprayed some Ting Ting with copper color. And then I've used the flax, but I wanted it to be a little stringier. So flax is so much fun to play with. You can strip it and turn it inside out. And you've got something that looks like that. And we'll just add another one in here. And the other plant material in here is leucadendron, which is Safari Sunset by common name. And it will dry, and you can keep it for dried materials kind of thing. So this was my attempt at making a disc in the shape of a desert rose. I think we'll set that one right here. Okay. Now, we're in the middle of the country, and we're going to go west to Oregon. Have you been to Oregon? The beaches are fabulous, aren't they? I forgot to mention, too, that we do some history along the way, and that was the completion of my Lewis and Clark education, because we saw the spot where they saw the Pacific Ocean. I still sometimes have to renew some of the facts because I keep forgetting, but that's okay. But of course, we went to Portland. And in Portland, you have the Rose Garden. And we took a tour of the Rose Garden. And for those of you who know about Master Gardeners, there was one that was offering a tour of the Rose Garden. I thought this would be awesome. We're going to sign up for that. So 3 of us, I think, showed up to have the tour with the Master Gardener. And wouldn't you know, at the moment we started, it started raining. But Master Gardeners never give up. And so the water was dripping off his hat, and we're walking around the Rose Garden, but it was really fun to be with him. And I did see what I think is my second favorite rose is the Julia Child rose. I don't know if you know that one, but it looks apricot in the bud and whipped butter when it opens. So it's Julia Child's favorite. Anyway, so the next day, wouldn't you know, they're having a rose parade. Nothing like the big rose parade on the TV, but nevertheless a rose parade. So it was sunny, and we went to the rose parade, and after that we were downtown Portland, so we decided to go to the Chinese garden, and that takes up a city block. Built in the 80s, they started to research it and did some fundraising, and they became sister cities with Suzhou, which is the Chinese garden capital of China, of the world, I guess, maybe. And so 65 artisans came over from China, and eventually in 1998, it took 14 months to put it together. All of the buildings came over in pieces on the boat. All of the, they also brought 2 cooks with them too. And they could not bring the plants because you couldn't import them. But there are over 300 species of plants in the garden, and they were all grown in the area. They had the most fascinating part for me, aside from the gorgeous garden, which is mostly green, and you know, they try to make a miniature landscape instead of having little flower gardens everywhere. It's mostly greens. And then a lot of symbolism. I love the symbolism, like in the tiles and everything. But I loved the windows. They call them leek windows. And they're all different shapes, you know, different designs, 52 different designs of windows. And like the Hall of the Brocade, where they would entertain people, has a different style window on each side. And every time you look out, you see a different view in this garden. This would be a garden for a learned scholar. And they renamed the garden, which was the classical Chinese garden, to the Lan Su Garden in 2010, which was the 10th anniversary of it being opened. And the original name, or the name for the garden, meant Garden of Awakening Orchids. So I thought I should be using some orchids in this design. So I've created a window that you would look out. And I created it with equisetum, which is rush, which grows in like the ditches in Louisiana and southern places. I mean, it's a weed, really. We have to buy it, but it's a weed. And when my kids entered, my grandkids, entered WAFA when it was here in Boston. I don't know if you went to the World Flower Show there, but they had a children's section. And we were having trouble getting children to enter, you know, so I said, oh, well, maybe they will. And so I started thinking, how can I get them interested in making their arrangements? So we said, well, we tell a story. I like to tell stories with my flowers. So I got them to work with equisetum, which bends, but that doesn't stay too well. So you have to take one of these wires. I like the flocked wire. You stuff it into the equisetum, and when you bend it, it stays. So every one of these is wired. I tried not wiring this one because it doesn't have any weight, but it wouldn't hold its own. So Quincy, who was 6 years old at the time, he wanted to go to the beach. They were supposed to travel. And so he made a lifeguard chair and all that kind of stuff with the equisetum. Abby wanted to go to Africa, and she made a lion cage. And she used the pincushion potilla for the lions. So they had fun. So now I have my leek window. And I'm going to look out and see a nice stem of orchids. So we have one. I don't know why I love green orchids. We're going to put one high and one low. These are philodendron leaves, cut philodendron leaves. So we'll put another one in front. And then put one down here. And one in the back. And I think I actually have a postcard of a leak window. Mine doesn't look anything like that, but anyway, I think I would send you one of these from the Lansu Garden in Portland, Oregon. I'm just going to turn it upside down and put it on here. Okay. Now, we'll come back east, and maybe a lot of you have gone to this garden, which is in Pennsylvania. Chanticleer, have you gone? Well, you're going to put it on your list. Only takes 6.5 to 7 hours to drive there. This is along the main line in Philadelphia, and it was started, it got its start in the early 1900s by Adolf Rosengarten, who decided that he wanted to come out to the main line of Philadelphia, you know, along the main line, railroad line, out to Wayne, Pennsylvania. And he built his country house there so he could get out of the city. And then he loved it so much that in 1924 he decided he was going to live there. And he could afford to come out there and live because he had a pharmaceutical firm, and in the 1920 he sold it to Merck. So he had a lot of garden money to play with, and he also had 2 children, a boy and a girl, and he bought them each a house right next to his property, so now he had a lot more property. And Adolf Rosengarten Jr. just passed away in the late 1990s. And when he was interested in the gardens, and he wanted to leave it to the public. So their idea was to take his house, which was called the Minder House, and use the ruins as a site for a certain garden, because there's so many garden rooms at the garden. This would be a different one of them. So, of course, for safety reasons, they couldn't do that. But what they did was knock down his house and build up a ruin. And so there are all these walls that look like, the first time I was there, I hadn't done my homework. It was kind of like an accidental find. My sister was with me, and I kept saying, is this an old wall or not? You know, you kept looking at it, wondering. But in the wall, there were like all these holes, and all these plants were growing out of them. And so I tried to do this design with plants that I think might be just growing out of the wall. And my little leaf manipulation for this one is using a fern. And ferns are fun to play with, and some of you might even have Boston ferns in your house, and you might want to try it. This is a sword fern, and I like to take it, I don't know if you can see it from back there, but I've made circles out of them. Okay? And in order to make it look more like a circle, I strip the half of it, take it off, so that when you make it like a circle, you can see the center. And then I use my paper covered wire and just twist it around here so that it stays. This paper covered wire is a good thing to have in your toolbox. Works for a lot of things. And then just tuck it in. And then, you know, so you can strip it out like that. You know, actually a couple in the package kind of looked like that. So I said, wow, nothing new. All right, so we're at this garden. There are, here, lots and lots of perennials. And we were there at the very end of August. And the red lobelia or cardinal flower was just growing, blooming everywhere. It was amazing. And the blue lobelia along with it, so it was quite colorful. And so I'm putting in some red coneflower. They have a vegetable garden that's amazing. They've done a new woodland garden there. And I could see that a huge tree had fallen way ahead along the path. They had taken the little stream and they had built a really cool stone walls along it, you know, so you wanted to walk along and just look at everything. And then I saw this tree had fallen down and went, oh no. And you got closer and here it was the bridge that you went from one side of the stream to the other, but from a distance it really looked like a tree. But it was big enough to, you know, for like 3 people to walk across. So it's very cool. They keep it in very natural. And they have a Japanese garden. They had a very fascinating lily pad garden. You know, the lotus pods were in all different shapes. There were some brown ones, there were some green ones, there were some buds that were ready to bloom, there were buds that were open. I don't think I'd ever seen such a bright pink lotus blossom before. Which also brings up a point, in the same trip we went to Longwood Gardens. Have any of you been there? And we saw the big lotus platters. And they're like platters with little edges, like you could put your cookies on there and not spill off, because they've hybridized them right there themselves. And that was very fascinating. And at night they light up the gardens so you can see them. And I think they only bloom one night. One night is a female, one night is a male, and then they're gone. The guide said it takes a lot of energy to do the sex change. So I'm putting a little butterfly weed in because there were butterflies flying everywhere. And it also picks up the color of the coneflower. I've got so much stuff in here. We'll put that around. And we'll add some in the back. And then in this Minder house where the ruin garden is, they have 3 rooms. They have the great room, the pool room, and the library. And in the great room they have a mantle, and on the mantle it's just strewn with echeveria, hens and chicks and all, big ones, little ones, different colors. So I've put a couple of echeveria in here. And there is also a huge, they call it the dining room table, but it's actually a pool. And so you can see the reflection of it all in the pool. So I'm going to build a wall. I think I better build it over here. Then we won't have to move it. And then in the library, the sculptor has sculpted all different kinds of books. And they're kind of strewn around the fireplace, on the floor, on the bench. And then in the pool room, there's this horrible looking fountain, well, I mean, it's not horrible, but it's got these horrible faces in it. And then outside, they have some chairs, like you could sit down. They're concrete stairs. And I need a mason. We're in the right place, I guess. All right. We'll leave that in here. So I'm building a ruin here. And my ruin already has plants in it. Well, I've found these in the market, and I'll give away this one, but I've been giving away another one that I use, and now I can't get it anymore, so I can't give away all of them. But so there's my ruin with plants growing out. Oh, yes, now I'll move this, and maybe you can see better. Okay, now we're going to stay close to home. And I'm going to take this apart right now. But many of you, I'm sure, have been to Tower Hill, right? Well, what Tower Hill reminds me of, obviously, is fruit. When you drive up the driveway, you have apple trees galore, right? Heirloom apples. And so I filled this treasure that I found at a yard sale, which I can't give away either, with fruit. But you can do that easy at home with just any open container. And then just put a little container on top, doesn't have to be this big, and put a couple flowers in it. They'll think you're a pro. I've got a lot of leaf manipulation in this design. I was trying to convey the idea of all the paths that you can take at Tower Hill. The ones that overlook Wachusett, the ones through the woods, the ones up to the top, the ones through next to the folly, everywhere. And so I've taken my aspidistra. This aspidistra is called Milky Way. Has little spots on it. I like it because it's not so big. And so I've wired it, and actually I want it to stay here. So I'm going to put my U-glue. That was the U-glue there. And I love to weave a leaf. So I start out, this is a Milky Way that I've made strips in. Oh, it's bent this way. See it? See them? And I used an X-Acto knife and did this, but you could just do your colors. Because I know you're all going to go home and do this. And then, because I have it stripped like this, I've taken lily grass, which is the wider grass, this wide, a little bit wider than bare grass. You could do it with bare grass, but it takes too much lime. So this is lily grass, and then I weave it through, just like you were taking a piece of paper. You can weave ribbon, you can weave anything through it. And then in order to keep it, I tape it on the back so it doesn't slide up and down, because I could probably pull one of, well, oh yeah, see, I can pull one of these out, because it didn't get taped. But I also, before I did that even, I wired the leaf, because the leaf, you saw how this one isn't wired. This one is wired. So you can see it on the back. The secret is you don't want to see all this stuff on the back. So you take U-glues and I put them down all around this, and then I glue this one to this one, hopefully a better fit than this, and pull the right one. And then all you see is the back of the same, you think it's the back of the same leaf. And I didn't think I didn't know. I was fascinated by this because I love the look. I love the texture of it. And so I practiced, and you know, you don't have to be exact. It still looks good because nobody really sits down and weaves leaves. So I practiced, and then lo and behold, at the MFA, I got the assignment of an African ceremonial skirt, which was a woven skirt, and it was like raffia, you know, raffia color, straw, or whatever it was made out of. And so I took one of the dark leaves, like the black teas, and it had a border. It was black and raffia color. And I wove palm, you know the palms you have at Easter, the strips? I wove that through, and it looked like the skirt. And so everybody will walk by and they go like that. It was like, what is that? Because it was way back when nobody really had ever seen much weaving. So that was so much fun because it was so different. So anyway, so I love the textures, and I just kind of wove this around like paths or hills or whatever. And this is actually the palms or teepee or emerald leaf that has a variety of different names. It's so big, it's hard to use. So I cut it. And this looks good, like if you're interpreting something that needs to have an African feel or something, you can make different shapes. My philosophy is if you have a space or a feeling and nothing seems to fit, you make it fit. So if it's too big, you cut it small. If it's too wide, you scrunch it up. You know, you bend it. You do whatever it is. This happens to be the regular bear grass. This is what, don't worry about it. This is bear grass. This is bear, well, maybe not quite as much of it. I took one of my trusty wires. I put it in the middle. I took my aluminum wire like this, and I went, and then it stays where you want it. I did a workshop with this, poor Acton. I do floral design workshops with them all the time, and so I try out all my ideas on them. And so I was so explicit about putting the wire in because you needed it to keep it that, you know, I thought I was very explicit. And then some of them forgot, and they were all upset because their strips didn't stay bent. So these are more paths, different kinds of paths going around Tower Hill. This fluffy green, it reminds me of trees and shrubs, and it's called trachelium. And it comes in lavender and purple, dark purple. You probably have seen that more often than the green, maybe. And then, of course, the eryngium, the thistles, which I'm sure they have a lot of at Tower Hill. There's a flower show coming up at Tower Hill, by the way, in November, 7th, 8th, and 9th. Called Autumn Joy. And so maybe if you're in the area, you can come see. It's always a really good one. So now we're going to use some more of these beautiful roses because they have gorgeous roses there. They have gorgeous everything. But, and one of this design says to me, like, you know the systematic gardens they have planted outside the conservatory. They're all, the colors clumped together, all the families or whatever. And so I'm going to mass the roses together. And I've massed other things. I've massed the pit leaves together. I've massed the trachelium together. So things, you know, kind of like when you're gardening. If you put a whole lot of the same thing in one area, whew, it makes a real wow. So that's what I'm trying to do. Not only are the apples, but I put in the lemons because of the new Limonia that they opened there, where they have the nice classroom at the end. And And then the oranges are for the orangerie, where they put all the tropical plants in the wintertime. So when you're interpreting, you can get a little crazy after a while. Everything has a meaning. So I like to make up all the meanings. I do a lot of church flowers, and I decide to make them meaningful sometimes and go along with the scripture. I think we'll add a couple of apples here too. They're almost the same color as the roses. And I've put skewers in them, 2 of them, not just one. If you put one, they're liable to be upside down when next time you look at them. I used to say, if we were delivering at the flower shop, you know, the worst nightmare would be to have the delivery person have to fix your arrangement. So if I put apples or anything in them, which we did in the fall sometimes, you didn't want them to be falling out and rolling all over the van. So we had to put at least 2 in. Yes?
That's so heavy. How did you fasten the oasis to the...
Oh, it's taped across.
Oh, okay.
I have different kinds of tape. I have a wide tape, which I rarely use when I'm doing it because it takes up too much room. But if I had something really heavy, I'd use this wide tape. The narrow tape works better. It comes in white, and it comes in green, and then it also comes in clear. So the reason you don't see it here is because I've used clear on it. And the clear doesn't really leave any marks, whereas you might find marks left by the oasis tape because the residue stays on there if you don't take it off quickly. Well, I mean, within a reasonable number of weeks. I thought I'd add some kale too. Aren't these cute? Usually they're just big, you know, big, this whole thing. But I've taken, you can kind of see, I've taken a lot of the big leaves off because I like the little ones. But I think the green and the white are going to look really nice in with the Milky Way here. If I can get it in. Yeah. And let's see, another spot for it down here, I think. They do have big stems, so you have to, I kind of make them points so they go in better. And I think we'll add one more rose hiding underneath. When you're walking in the woods, you always find little surprises. So, and then we'll take it over here and sit it on top. Okay. Now, last but not least, we went to Oregon, now we're going to Maine, okay? Well, of course we have to go on a boat. So we're going to Coastal Maine Botanical Gardens. Have you been there? No? Well, that absolutely has to be on your list as well. It's not even, it's only, what, 3 hours away. So we have been vacationing in Booth Bay. Well, right outside, actually, the Coastal Maine Botanical Garden is on Barter's Island Road. And we've been vacationing on Barter's Island. So it was opened in 2007. The visitor center opened. Fabulous visitor center. But it took 16 years in the planning and earning money and in the making to open the gardens. And around 2004, there was some action at the site. So we decided to walk over there. We can walk to it. We're that close. Or now we can kayak to it. If I could get out of the kayak at the dock, I would be happy. I haven't tried it yet, but anyway, it's a possibility. We used to kayak by it and say, gee, it would be fun if we could get out. I thought you could beach, you know, right up and walk in, but no, they put up a fancy dock and you have to get off. So, but I now like to save my energy for after I get there because there's so much to walk around and see. Because the first time when we went there, you could walk on the coastal path, you could walk in the native plants, you could walk in the fern and moss garden, and you said, well, this is nice. And there was a little wooden box that had the little map in it, you know, and there was nobody there. And so I had no idea what was going to happen. 2007, they opened the visitor center, and wow, it was pretty awesome. And the gardens, and what I loved there too is that they have sculptures. Every year they feature a different sculptor or type of sculptures. So like, for example, this year the theme was pollinators. So everything was themed towards that, so that you had bees and butterflies and, you know, all things that would feed the butterflies, and, you know, it was very cool. One year they had birds, so they had birds all over, different kind of birds and different ones. My favorite was the year they had the rebar. She'd made things out of junk, like rebar and stuff, and she sprayed it. Some of them she sprayed like with a kind of a whitewash color. And I mean, like the porcupine looked like it was going to jump on you. And we were sitting up at the waterfall, and the waterfall, you know, you're so peaceful, and this mountain lion is like, ooh, you know, I mean, amazing. And they've kept like the elk with its antlers, and we were walking through the azalea and rhododendron garden, and there were antlers like in this one area. She had made those. They looked so real. Unbelievable. It was just unbelievable. So every year they have a different theme. And they're always awesome. And I think they must purchase at least one, or the sculptures will leave them there, hoping someone will buy them for a mere $6,500 or something, you know. So a little beyond me. But my favorite garden, the sensory garden, is just unbelievable. In fact, our little 18-month-old grandson stood by the fountain, which comes straight across and down, like you can't see how the water is coming off, and just petting the water for like 15 minutes. So the sensory garden is really cool. But I think my favorite is the children's garden. It's not just for children. But what is really fun is to see the children having such a good time in the children's garden. And all of the sculptures in the garden, the permanent ones, are themed for books, children's books, either about Maine or Maine authors. So McCloskey, you know, Blueberries for Sal, and so forth, is featured for like 3 of them anyway. But I think my favorite one is Bert Dow, the Deep Water Man. And they have a boat like the Tidely Idly there. He was a fisherman at one point. Now he just does odd jobs for people in the town. And his boat is kind of leaky and doesn't work anymore. So he uses leftover paint to paint it and patch it. That's why it's so colorful. But he still takes it out every day. And so this is Bert's boat. And this is kiwi that my friend has some kiwi, some massive ramble. And I just feel like it's my duty to help her clean it out. And so I love twisting it all around and then using my wire, you see that wire, you want to hold that up? That's bark covered wire. So I think if where I've twisted it on, you can't really tell whether I twisted that or whether it's the kiwi, hopefully. And so this is you know, the boat needs a lot of help. And it has a make and break engine, which I thought was just a funny name, but really the old engines were called make and break engines. And so he starts it up every day and he goes fishing. And he's really, you know, very cautious about watching the weather. And so this one day he goes out and he's fishing and he's not catching anything. And so he keeps moving further and further out. And he has a friend with him. It's a gull. It's a giggling gull. I guess it's kind of like a laughing gull. Do you ever be around laughing gulls? They're so loud and they're always laughing. He wasn't catching anything, so he kept moving and moving, and finally he caught something. And it was so strong on his pole that the boat went flying up. And the gull was laughing fit to split. And my grandson, I thought the book was going to be too old for him. It's a very long book. We had to read it over and over again, and he loved that page where the gull laughed fit to split. So we are going to add some gulls to our arrangement using some Bird of Paradise. And you know, if you buy Bird of Paradise and they aren't opening, you kind of put your fingers down in, this one was being very contrary, and pull it up. He really doesn't want to open. But usually you can convince them to open. But that's okay, we don't care. He'll open sooner or later. And so we'll add some gulls, because they always fly along lobster boats, right? So as he's moving further and further, he catches this thing, and finally he figures out, after he goes flying up in the air, that he's hooked a whale. And he can't get it unhooked. So he tries and tries and tries, and finally he gets it unhooked. But after that, he feels so bad for the whale that he opens his little toolbox and he gets out a Band-Aid that Doc Walton, one of his customers that he paints for, had given him just in case he cut himself when he was out fishing, you know. And so he puts this Band-Aid on the whale, and it happens to be peppermint striped. So I've made peppermint striped Band-Aids for my whale. I've taken the lily grass. Where's my little bucket? Oh, here it is. This is the lily grass. And I've taken 2 different color wires, and I've started them down at the base of this and just wrap them up and wrap them back down again. And then I took my U-glues and I stuck them to the black tea leaf, which I had wired, and stuck another one on the back so you wouldn't see the wire. Now, the problem with sticking the lily grass on is that it's narrow, right? And the U-glue is about this wide. So you have to cut it. So there are some tricks to it, like putting Pam on your scissors, which gets a little messy. But I found the perfect solution. I found the titanium non-stick Fiskars at Joann Fabrics, and they cut U-glues perfectly. So they are in my toolbox. So I've done that. So now I have Band-Aid on my whale. So now the storm comes up because he wasn't paying attention, and he got his you know, he got caught, and he got caught in the whale, and he got out a little bit too far, and now the storm is coming up. So he makes a deal with the whale that the whale will swallow him, and so he can fix his boat inside the whale, and then when the storm's over, he had to figure out to make sure that the whale would keep his end of the deal and cough him up again. So he's inside, he's painting the inside of the whale, all different colors, all the paints that he has in his boat, and he has the gull in there tickling the whale's throat so that he's gonna cough him up. And it works, and he gets out. But when he gets out, there is a whole school of whales outside waiting for him, and they won't let him go home. They keep surrounding him, they won't let him out. He couldn't figure out what to do. He tried everything. And so finally, he figured out that they all wanted a Band-Aid too. So he gives every one of the whales a Band-Aid, and then he is able to go home. So anyway, it's a silly story, but it's a lot of fun, and my whales are still happy. So I've put in another few sea creatures here. Now see, this whale's not cooperating, so I'm going to U-glue him back here so that he's not so big. Like I said, if things are too big, you have to figure out how to make them work. And I love that dark color tea leaf, but it only comes in a big size. So I'm going to U-glue this back here, and you have to put it on, make sure it sticks, which this one's giving me trouble. And then you pull it off. It's like that stuff that sticks perfume in your magazines, you know? That's exactly what it's like. So, will you come with me every time? All right, and then I have a few, you all know what these are? Carnations. And they're called green trick. And you can see I've taken the little leaf, you know, the carnation leaves that are usually on, see? I've taken them off here. But these are carnations, and they're called green tricks, and I think that's why, because they're kind of tricky carnations. But I think they look like sea creatures, don't you? So we'll add a few of those in, a couple of those. And I think we need to add some pink for, this was the color he painted Ginny Poor's Pantry. So we will put some of that in because he had that and then his, but the Toddly Addly at the Coastal Maine Botanical Garden, the little kids can sit in it, put on the ring, you know, the fishing gear, throw the lobster traps in, you know, have fun with that. There's a little house where they can, I think Quincy feels like it's his duty to sweep it every time he goes there. He sweeps and sweeps, and then there's a rope swing you can walk across. There's, I mean, it's just fabulous. They have story hour, they have crafts. Quincy went to camp when he was little there, when you could get in, and he, I think he was at the garden like 8 days out of 14. He just loves it, so that's what makes it so much fun. Okay, so we've done that, and I think we'll add some pittosporum to give it a little weight here. And so I don't know, Coastal Maine doesn't have many postcards, but my postcard would certainly pick up the children's garden. And now, as I said, the first time we went, there was nobody there, and now you can hardly find a parking spot. It's like about I don't know, 6 or 7 parking lots, and they're full. But let me see, what else do we have here that we can finish up. So this is going to be my postcard from coastal Maine, and I do recommend that you put that on your list. So, okay? I'm going to add one more, and that ends our tour. And I hope you get the idea that this is like art in bloom. You know, I'm depicting the Bert Dow tidally idly thing, but I didn't put Bert Dow in the center or anything. I just made the giggling gull and that kind of thing. So that's the way I like to do art in bloom. So thank you again for having me.